And we're live, and
Yes.
welcome to another edition of Life is People. Well, we just briefly talking before we went live, Miriam. I know you're not in the best of conditions, but given that, how are you today anyway?
Um, Busy. My workload has about tripled for one client, and I mean it's interesting stuff. It's for the ACE reader, which I mentioned before. I'm developing some new content to help people with the warm-up drills, so that they can learn how to move their eyes appropriately when they're reading. And we didn't have enough text. So as the content developer, it falls in my lap. And we just started a new blog, which is really exciting. Uh, it was supposed to be divided among a number of people, and it kind of ended up with me doing the blog. So, it's just one after the other. I'm churning out topics and learning a lot in the process, which is great. And I'm having a lot of fun because, hey, I'm a writer and that's what I do and that's what I love to do. So it gives me an opportunity to do what I want to do and learn something in the process. So it's all good.
I just sort of feel that you just something you briefly mentioned then, and again, it's raised another question to me. You mentioned then teaching people to learn to read from one side to another. I wouldn't even cross my mind that would even be a problem.
Learn to read effectively is what we're doing. It's not reading from one side to the other. It's learning how to read any material, anything that is printed, learn how to read it effectively. Because what most people do is they read word by word. And that is very, very inefficient, and it does not help your reading comprehension, which is the problem. Because you're seeing each word out of context. When you read efficiently, you learn to read groups of words at a time, so that you're getting it in context. You're able to understand more of what the author is trying to say, and therefore your reading comprehension goes up, and so does your speed. So you're able to get through the material more quickly, and you're able to understand more on the first pass. And then you can go back and clarify different points or whatever. But the main problem that people have, two main problems that people have, is that they read word by word, and they also hear a little voice in their head that reads along with them. Since the average adult talking speed is between 200 and 250 words a minute, that's as fast as you can go. Now, why should you limit yourself to that when you can read much, much faster than that? I'm not talking about reading 15, 20,000 words a minute. That's a little ridiculous. But, why can't you read 500, 600 words a minute and still understand what you're reading? That way, you gain about like between 16 and 20 minutes an hour. So if you spend an hour reading, you've just gained a quarter of that more to cover, or for free time. Go do something else. You've saved yourself a lot of time. You've understood more because the material is in context. And, it helps you, whether it's for work or whether it's for school or whatever. Being an efficient reader helps you in all aspects of your life, because reading is the great liberator. We learn by reading. It's how we it's how we as writers communicate. So we have ideas, we put them down on paper or electrons. Um, we communicate. The reader takes the information and absorbs it. So we've had a dialogue. We've had information exchange between the writer and the reader, and maybe feedback back to the writer. So we learn a lot about other ideas, other people, other cultures, other perspectives on the world and how it works or doesn't work. Um, so it's a great thing to be able to master. I can't imagine a life without books. And that's part of the reason my apartment is so cluttered, is because I can't stop getting books. You know, I go anywhere near Amazon or a bookstore. We do have a couple bookstores still left. And, you know, the money starts crawling out of my pocket going, spend me, you know, and I always say, okay, yeah, sure, that's a great idea, you know, and then I just have all these books. So
Well,
I don't mind though.
again, Miriam, what you just said has begged many points, and I think the first one I really want to reiterate is, I think this is a general advice that many creative people can have, but especially particularly when they're writing. And I remember it was a great lesson I learned and became really part of my discipline whenever I wrote, and it touches upon what you just said. This is from the creative point of view. It's someone who's writing has got to learn to cut a lot of the flowery language, for what a very English word.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, I mean, I learned that when I was, because it was one of the lessons I learned when I did my creative writing, when I was at uni. That, the first thing my lecturer said to me, she said, right, okay, I want you to take that 2,000 word piece you got and narrow it down to 700, and then narrow it down to 500. And you're amazed about how many times you repeat words and how much it's almost it's a balancing act. And this is why I was saying, when you're a creative person and you love language, you have a very much a deep love for language. You want to use new words, you love to explore it's a very, and that's one of the loves you have as a writer. But you have to sort of balance that between, okay, I could write a really poetic prosy line that just describes in elementary souls, and I can maybe spend a week on that line, but eventually all you're trying to go is it was nice and sunny outside, and it's cutting that down, which I think is a really great lesson for people. From what you're just saying, from the other side, that the people who put out content have got to understand that the other side, as much as we don't try to write ever for the person who's going to read it, we have to always bear in mind at the back of our heads, let's try to edit it down to the basics. So I think that's
yeah, I did that as an experiment. I wrote a book, a collection of what I called ultra shorts. I was allowed 150 words or fewer to write a story. That means a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had to make sense. It had to tell something. It had to have an idea or a plot or whatever. But if I ran into 151 words, I had to figure out which one didn't belong there and cut it out. So it was a great experiment, because I tend towards what's known as purple prose, very flowery language, lots of words, and that's not always the best way to communicate. Sometimes fewer words make more of an impact than loads and loads of words. And so this was my great experiment into how I could do that. And I found that it was very possible to cut things down to 150 words or fewer. So some of mine were, 142 or something like that. It just had to have all the components of a story. And but keeping in mind that the audience needs to be entertained, educated, whatever you wanted from them, that had to be in the communication. And so the story had to be complete. They needed to feel satisfied that they had read a story and not just a collection of words, random words placed down on the page. And I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I think that sort of ties into the second point that I wanted to sort of go back to what you were saying when you were speaking upon it. Was one of the things that you were speaking about, love of books. I've always had a love of books, and one of the things my father used to collect old Bibles and stuff, and it was like he used to have Bibles that 1700s and stuff, and it was like it's fascinating reading through it. But what I learned from this, and I think it ties into what you're saying, was one about how it fascinates me day on day that we live in this technological world, and there's almost this great rush to get everything, and we put everything into online. And you were saying upon it, we do things onto these screens, and I think, well, what happens if we get hit by, you know, sort of solar flare and all the electronics go down? None of this is being recorded at all. Again, I mean, you look at a book, that's what I'm saying, from the, you know, maybe 300 years ago, and you realize how fragile it is, and you think, okay, that's going to wither away. And then you start to look at like ancient cultures, and I mean, I live literally, I could walk from my house right here, you know, 5 minutes, and there's a standing stone there with engravings on it, and they can approximate it's at least 3 or 4,000 BC. I mean, I don't actually know, because you're looking at just, you know, engraving symbols on a standing. And I think, yeah, that's lasted all this time. What would we have of our culture if we got hit by a solar flare and some sort of, you know, flood or something, environmental thing? What have we got left? There's nothing. We all we've got is Mount Rushmore. And what's that going to tell future generations?
Absolutely. Did you ever watch The Twilight Zone?
Yeah, I used to watch some, yeah.
There was an episode called Time Enough at Last. There was some kind of nuclear holocaust, and everybody was killed save one man. And this man was a bibliophile. He loved books, but he never had time because he always had to work. He had to do stuff, whatever. But he's the last man on Earth. And he finally has time enough at last to read all these books. But being the Twilight Zone, there was a catch. He wore glasses. And you can imagine what happened to the glasses. So here he is, alone, all the books in the world, and no glasses. You know, it was like the cruelest thing that could possibly happen to him, you know, because now he can't read.
Well,
you know?
I mean, on a very sort of similarity. I mean, one of my literary heroes, as people, you know, I kind of put on top of my list of who I really look up to and admire for writing, was Borges in Argentina, and he had that very curse. I mean, he was a poet, loved writing, and he actually wrote books about it. And by the time he got to age, he was in charge of the National Library of Argentina. You know, so and he wrote about it. You know, he was in this library having exactly that situation, but he was blind and going blind and blind, and he was talks about this curse about stuck in his paradise, but the curse of having. So it's amazing, because like I said, I think the fascination you're saying there, Miriam, is, and that's what I'm saying, it is that love of words and stuff like that. But I keep going back to it. I just wonder how much. And see, it ties into the other thing as well. I think it's great about putting everything into screens and doing that. And I'm never against anything that's going to allow anybody to express their creativity. But what
Right.
I wonder how long it's going to be if this happens at all, because I'm starting to notice it, and I think anybody can notice it. How many times do people who don't sit and write with their hands? I mean, I'm lucky. I write and draw with my hands. I keep that discipline alive. I said to a friend the other day, I said to him, okay, write me an A4 sheet of writing. And by the time we got to the bottom, it was ineligible. And he said, wow. I said, yeah, we're losing these skills of actually writing on paper. And it's, to me, I'm fascinated, because it's all well and great typing, but I still think there's a time and a place, like I say, for keeping some of the old skills, because maybe we're just being too, like all cultures do, they get too foolish about the technology and think we're always going to run away with this modernity. And actually, you know, eventually it's always going to come back to someone writing a bit of paper. But some of these skills, I personally think, are they starting to be dissolved, and we're actually losing it as a species with our rush to type everything into keyboards?
They, in the grade schools here, they've stopped teaching cursive writing. So a lot of the kids come out and they can't read cursive. I don't know how they sign their name, because you have to sign it in cursive. You can't, if you just print block letters, then it could be anybody's signature. But everybody has distinct handwriting. And so the signature is something in cursive that is distinctive about the person. But they're doing away with it because, oh, well, people can type. But what happens if there's nothing around to type on? People are losing the art of actually writing. Longhand, snail mail, a love letter to your boyfriend, a thank you note for something extraordinarily generous that somebody has done. If you get it typed on a piece of paper, that's great, but where's the connection? The connection comes from the thought, the planning, and the actual act of writing something for somebody else, and then mailing it so that a letter arrives, and you can open it and read it again and read it again. And it's not just type on a screen that anybody could have done. It's a very personal thing. And I think we're losing that in our rush to embrace technology. I think we're losing some of the basics that I think that we're worse off without them, because they take away our uniqueness, they take away our creativity, they take away some aspect of who we are. And I never had great penmanship. I would get straight A's, and in handwriting, I'd get a C if I was lucky, because, and sometimes I couldn't even read my own writing. It's that bad. But still, I do things longhand a lot of the time. I do write letters on occasion, when I want to make a point or show gratitude. I don't want to just type up a letter and maybe write my name at the bottom and that's it, because that's so impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
The actual act of writing is a very personal thing and very unique to our species. And I think that's something that's really getting lost in our culture, and it's unfortunate.
But I agree with you, Miriam, and I think it sort of taps into something you alluded to earlier on. I think, it's part of what we are as a species. Maybe we love, and that's what I'm saying. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm not a luddite. I'm not saying we should go back, but that we have this urge for technology, and it offers us speed. And it was something you tapped into earlier on. Yeah, maybe our thought process in our minds can be varying speeds amongst individuals, but they can work on a lot faster speed than you can actually handwrite. And what the keyboard has given us is the ability to speed it up. But I think what we're losing in this, and this is one of the skills I felt with writing anything down, was because you're having to compose and sit there and take the time. It almost slows everything down, and okay, right, I'm gonna have to put what, and it makes your brain slow down to okay, I'm actually having to put something on paper, which makes it's a bit like I always use the analogy. It's like the difference between paint by numbers, where you go, okay, great, and it's almost like being on a computer. All I've got to do is press that button, it's going to go red, and before you know it, in 2 minutes I've got a painting. Or the same with music, you could just turn on a beatbox, and great, you've got a little tune going. But there's a difference between that and composing, because the thing about writing down, and like you said, putting something on paper, it slows everything down, and I think that leads to more effective communication. Because I think if we can, you see it when you see kids, and they're all running around a million miles, and they're like buzzing around, and it's got, and when you get older, you realize that you slow down, and you can we talked about before, you can effectively your communication by slowing down. And I think that's what the ability of actually putting something on paper does, which I think it goes back to what you were just saying, because it not only gives us more chances as who's writing to get our thoughts across more clearly, it also gives us that ability to, I don't know. So in some ways, it's almost the ability to actually put a thought you're trying to do in a more constructive, composed manner, actually, as compared to, okay, I've got a thought, bang, I'm going to bung it out, or I'm going to put it out on Twitter. And I think this is what you see on Twitter. We're living this generation where everybody can put an instant thought out. And I always say to people, I mean, I've been saying to my son for years, he's very, very, he's been very kind of smart on it, but all his friends, you see a whole generation of people who have put everything online, and they've just gone to that very point. I'm in an angry mood, and then bang, and it's gone. Whereas if they had to write that down and then send it to someone through the post, by the time they got to the post box, they're probably like, oh, okay, what am I doing writing this letter about? And it's the slowing down that I think with this urge for speed, we are just allowing sometimes all our worst elements as a human species to come out, and because we're in that and that's what I think about. I think really it should be more taught. I think the actual process of handwriting should be taught to kids, and it's quite, not one of those ones of like, okay, well, we don't need to do that. I think it's as much a skill that should be learned as it should be putting learning a child keyboard or a musician. There's actually I think a very positive element for the human species about composing and taking your time. That's my long-winded answer.
No. I also see it in an educational setting that I guess I'm dating myself here. I went to school, to university before the internet was even in existence. So we certainly didn't bring our laptops to take notes. But the act of, I think if I went back, because I periodically go back and take classes, I just audit because I don't want to deal with, the pressure of exams and whatever. I just want to learn. But I come with my notebook and my pen. Everybody's sitting there on their keyboard, and I'm with notebook and pen. And one of the things that does is I see the lecture both from the professor and what he writes on the board or the slides or whatever. I hear what he's saying and I write the words. So that's 3 types of input. That tells your brain, wait a minute, this is important. And when I go back over it, I'm going back over my notes, the way it looks when I write it. So you're getting a kinesthetic input that just typing, because typing is the same whether you're in chemistry or sociology. It's still just typing. And the words still just look the same on the page. But when you have to actually write the words and describe what the professor was saying and describe an example that he's given, you're giving yourself another input, basically a leg up that the people just typing on a keyboard don't have. And that seems to be all the rage right now is you take your notebook or your laptop or whatever to class, and that's how you do your notes. But when I went to school, we wrote it all down, and then we probably copied it again so it was more legible. So that's, again, more input kinesthetically. And that way we learned the material in a more constructive fashion and a more lasting fashion, that you can remember what was said a month or 2 down the line. Whereas if you just type, you don't have that muscle memory. And so I think in that way we're losing out in education by doing away with the actual physical writing. And again, I'm not a Luddite either. I mean, I embrace technology. I don't know what I'd do without the internet now. I can't imagine not having a smartphone, all of that. But I see a lot of times what we are losing, as a species, as a culture, as communicators, both readers and writers, or students studying a particular course, we're losing that by not doing the actual physical writing.
Yep. I mean, one of the other things, Miriam, and I think again what you just alluded on to that, and I think it's another one that's kind of on the actual act of putting on paper. I mean, like you say, whether it's a university or stuff, or it's a lecture, or anybody else, part of the creative process, and one of the great beauties about having a pen, paper, whether you're sitting and listening, you're trying to take notes in a lecture or whatever, is it's all the bits when your hands starts to, okay, you're not maybe writing notes, but they start to do little doodles on the side, and before you know it, you're doing this, and and this is again, this isn't nothing new to us. I mean, you again go back to some of the old books I used to look at. What was more fascinating was seeing all the little scribbled notes that some guy had written in the Bible, and you can go, okay, I can get an insight of that person. And this goes back to when they describe it. You see the little, I mean, this whole history modules done on the little bits that the scribes would write on the bottom of manuscripts and stuff like that. But equally, and again, I mean, what are people fascinated? They're fascinated by the notebooks of Einstein, or if you could get hold of the notepad of Leonardo da Vinci, like, wow, it would be all these little sketches, and then and this is one of the things that you don't get on a keyboard, and that's why I love. I'm like you. I think keyboards are great, but I always have like it's literally. I mean, it's almost a part of my. I put my trousers on, I put my shirt on. I'll do what I do, and I'll carry a notebook with me all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
All the time, and so I have to have one when I wake up in the morning because, great, I can wake up in the morning and maybe type something, but I'd have to, I think that it's a discipline in waking up, and I have a blank bit of paper, and if there's anything there, I'll put it on that blank bit of paper because I can't. That's what I'm saying. You can't scribble on a laptop. You can,
Yeah.
and even if you can
Yeah.
on a screen, it's not the same. Actually, it's physical. There's a physical thing about having a pen in your hand and the feel of it on paper or whatever it is. There is something indelible about that, and I can say I think that's part of touching upon what we are as a species. Now, seeing we're kind of halfway through this conversation, and the whole point of why I really wanted to delve in, I think, but this kind of bleeds into what we're wanting to talk about, about powerful entities and stuff. And I think one of the powerful, and I said this to you before, one of the powerful entities on this planet, I kind of go from one side to the other, my own personal one, which it is, but I think it is the human mind, and it's the ability. One of the tools that entity has out is through writing. That's the reason that we've got to where we have. Is because as humans we've learned to put, from the Sumerians were putting lines in right through to where we are now, and we've got this ability to communicate in a form as we just spent the last half an hour discussing about. And I think that's what is powerful about books, and it's always struck me that any culture that wants to go towards the totalitarian angle, whether it's through whatever political viewpoint they want to come through, whatever ism, the first thing they do is burn books, and they get rid of the artists and the writers, and because they know how powerful that entity can express itself through words. So that's just generally my thought. I mean, I tend to think that the individual mind inside us is a very powerful entity. And I personally think it's bigger than any corporation, state, government. And I think the only one I have a balance on on the other side, I think nature itself. And I mean, I think that is a very powerful entity on this planet that really, I think goes in some ways beyond the human mind, because we may be here for a little period of time, but I mean, it's all the times we talked about before. I mean, we may talk about environmental crisis and stuff, but that's only us as humans. The planet will go on. Nature's going to go on. They don't worry about it. It will find a way, because it's found a way in this cold, dark universe. So in that instance, when you really break it down, nature in itself, because it's going to be nature that's going to consume us. But I think of a species, I think it's my human mind, and I think the expression is done through the tools we talk about, through writing. So that's my thought process. And again, I'm fascinated to know what your thought processes are on what you actually think the most powerful entity on the planet is right now.
Well, I probably have to say the most influential is humanity. And I see that in both positive and negative ways. I mean, we have brought ourselves to great heights with new technology. We're exploring the universe, and discovering that, hey, planets are actually pretty common around other stars. We're not the only planet, or we're not the only solar system. There are many, many, many other ones out there. Whether they have life or not has yet to be determined. I'm of the opinion that we're going to find it someday, but nothing has been proven conclusively. But we have the power to do great things and the power to do terrible things. And I'm seeing both in the world that we're living in now. We can bring our species and other species and the world as a whole to great new heights. We can treat new diseases. We can figure out how to solve problems that were, a decade ago were barely thinkable. But now we have the technology, we have the resources, we have the creativity to do that. We also, with that great boom in our influence on the world around us, have the capacity to destroy it. And we have, with that technology, has not come the wisdom, the ethics of using that technology for benefit and not for destruction. So we're in this very unique position of being both extraordinarily powerful, as in we're able to help and build and create almost anything in this world, and yet we're at the brink of, if not already in, the Third World War, because we don't know how to regulate the technology. We don't know how to regulate our anger, our fear, basic elements of humanity. We don't know how to rein those in. We don't have yet the wisdom. Our technology has far outpaced our wisdom in using it. And that scares me, because will we be here in 100 years with great new technologies that will benefit our planet, our species, other species, the world as we know it? Or are we just going to hit the self-destruct button?
Yep.
And I see so much evidence of that possibility that it scares me. You know,
Yep.
we are we're not all powerful, but we are powerful enough to do a lot of harm. So it's a balance there, and we really need to decide or to figure out how we can balance one against the other.
Yeah, I totally concur with you there, Miriam, and I think this is what I'm saying. I mean, technology is in essence a neutral. I mean, you could even go into a wider discussion about, you know, we almost have the arrogance as humans to say, oh well, you know, it's artificial intelligence. I mean, how do we know this isn't just another expression of nature in the universe, and we could just be wiped out like ants? I mean, that's an arrogance we have as humans. We think that we're giving birth and it's all great, but this could outrun us and destroy us all. And look at the planet as in look at it and go, okay. I mean, I've often thought about this. If you were, you know, for want of a better word again, if an AI, and it's the first being, you know, birth of the AI, you know, intelligent computing systems, and it looks at the planet, what's it going to go? It's going to go, right, well, actually, humans are the problem. Actually,
Yeah.
they're the problem. So why don't I just get rid of humans and I live on this paradise, and I won't treat the dolphins like they were, and I've got no need to go and rape, you know, take, you know, plough loads of fields and make them to dust plants for you know, to feed people unhealthy corn. I've got no need for that. I'm a machine. I've got carbon life. You know, so I think that's why I think we need to. I think one of the things we as where we are now in this crossroads of where we are is, okay, we not you, not me, not even any government or corporation can control this anymore. It's almost like the genie's out the bottle. We've now got these, as a human species, the tentacles are out. We have got this information, and it has led to, like you said, Miriam, we're acting like a kids in a school playground, and one team is all this mentality and screaming at the other side, and the tools are like, yeah, I've got a microphone now and I can scream louder than you, and it's just like this. Okay, that's just the mindset, and you're right. I mean, that's, you can look throughout history and see that, you know, it's just no different from a conversation maybe had 100 years ago, when you think, okay, there's some people of understanding this thing is called, what is it, nuclear? That's going to be interesting. What are we going to do with this nuclear? And, you know, that's what we did with it and how we use it and control it.
Yeah.
So I think this is my element. Is I think you're right, because it's, I think what's most, I think really need to get crucial across is, which is, I mean, fundamentally the only thing any individual on this planet can do is, okay, what am I doing as an individual? What am I doing? You know, I can't affect 100 people around me. I'm never going to, you know, we could spend the next 2 hours, and we could sit about, you know, talk about Trump, and we could talk about Hillary, and we could talk about corporations, but if when it comes down to it, there is actually nothing you can do about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. That they've got machines around them. What we can do, the power we have got, is not interact with things, and this is the power we have got. I go, okay, I've got the power to choose. I've got the power. Do I go and we've done this with everything. Do I deliberately buy a product that's going to, I know it's at the end of this line, like, you know, do I go out? It's all choices. Should we all be making think, okay, we all, for instance, again, ties in with technology. We you know, there's this urge for phones, but nobody wants to sit and think, okay, at the end of this chain, there's a human being breaking a brick in Africa, and he ain't getting paid. And that's, you know, and that's the choices we've all got to make. Like we did this all. That's what fair trade was all about. And this is the individual we've all got. We go, okay, I don't want to partake in that anymore. And if we don't partake in about it, then we can take the power away from them, whatever it is, whether it's corporations or governments and stuff. And that is, I think, Miriam, and I think you really alluded to it, there's a fear element in human beings, because human beings are like, oh, no, 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 I don't want change. I'm quite happy to, that's why, look at what's going on in America. It's like,
Yeah.
who do you want, your mum or your dad to look after you? But everyone's clamoring to someone else to look after them. It's like, surely what we need to do as a species is to go, can we not get away from this mum, dad politics stuff and go, okay, when it breaks down to it, the person that puts my head on the pillow is me at the end of the night. I need to do something about myself, which is, to me, is an old Eastern philosophy and wisdom. So I think that's just my thought process. And I think that's why, for instance, I think you again, to what you said about the brink of war, this is the only way we're going to break out of this is, like I said before, the fear one. I mean, I'm living in Europe, Miriam, and all I'm seeing, I spent years of us watching how political systems have moved the people around to almost like a chess game to bring to this point. And now all I'm seeing is like, this is like 1939. I'm seeing walls go everywhere, nationalism is on the rise, people are blatantly coming out, and it's all being constructed. And I like you say, but the only way we're going to ever stop this is getting over this communication problem. I mean, it's like it's a recurring conversation, but we need to learn to reform ourselves, look at ourselves and make best of what we can, and then communicate effectively with people, instead of, like you just said, into this mentality of like, oh wow, I've got a microphone, I can go around screaming at everybody else. And I think we've got to, because if not, like I said, an intelligent machine comes along and goes, well, actually, you're just a bunch of kids and we don't need you anymore. And this planet has been around before you and it'll be around after you. And I think this is a real conversation, this kind of conversation needs to have everyone else, because I think most people are aware that the technology is coming very soon, where this isn't just a parlor, dinner time conversation about, the rise of internet. It's going to happen. And then it'll have that very moral decision to make and look at us as a species, and it's going to be what we're going to be like when we face that we have the ability to say to it, please, we're not all like that, and that's for us to reflect in ourselves.
There is, with communication, there are two parties. There is the party that is attempting to communicate, and then there's the party who is listening. And I think a large part of the problem, too, is that we've got the bullhorn, so we're yelling what we believe, but people on the other side are not listening. They don't want to, either they choose not to, or they're prevented from listening to what we have to say, or they don't realize that they have the power to do something if they do listen. I've come up against the choice element a number of times. I am a vegetarian by choice, and a lot of meat eaters, look at me and they say, well, humans are omnivores. We were built that way. I said, yes, but I was built to have a choice, and I made that choice. So that is, if we weren't meant to be able to choose, then that wouldn't have been built into us. So my choice is just as valid as your choice not to be a vegetarian. So I've come up with that, against that a lot. We have that also in the world arena, that, people have the choice to listen or not. Sometimes that choice is taken away by a government or a corrupt leader or propaganda or, whatever. But we are built with the capacity to choose. And we need to choose, especially at this tipping point in our history. We have to choose carefully and wisely. And I don't think we're doing that. There are too many people saying, oh, what we've been doing for hundreds of years is working just fine, don't change anything. Well, if you don't change anything, then are we going to be around to even talk about this? You've made a choice not to listen and to go your own way. Is that the right choice? Well, part of free speech is that everybody is allowed to speak their mind. And we're having a lot of that in this country right now dealing with our national anthem. I don't know if any of that has reached you. But, you know, groups of football players and soccer players and various other sports figures are choosing not to stand with hand over heart for the national anthem before a game. Because when you look at the words of the anthem, you see just how racist they are. And why should they stand up and say, yes, I choose to support this, even though you're basically saying you're going to take away all my freedoms? So they're choosing something to make a point and to engender a discussion. And the discussion is necessary. But on the other hand, people have to listen. People have to be willing to listen and not be so set in their ways. So it's a lot of give and take. There are no easy solutions to any of this. But we are, for whatever reason, we're born with the ability to choose whether it's a food or it's an ideology or it's a concept of a future world. We have the ability to choose. And there is no point in our history as delicate as right this minute, where we have to think very, very carefully about what we are choosing and not choosing to do. And I would just hope that people would be willing to listen, would be willing to think before they make their choice, and not just react with, you know, hundreds or thousands of years of what's been said, you know, just opting for that because it's easier. You know, choice isn't easy. It never is. To make a fully informed choice, you have to think. You have to put in the effort. I don't think people are putting in enough effort because look at the world.
Yeah, I mean, Miriam, and I think it's when you start looking at the world and you realize, I mean, there's one category you've spoken upon, which is the whole of the people, you know, and most people, you know, come across these people who say to me, you know, they say to you like, oh, you know, they worked all day and the last thing I want to do when I get home at night is think. I just want to switch my brain off. And that's one group of people that I could spend hours, because I've never understood that. But equally, there's another group, and I think you just kind of briefly touch upon this, is that maybe the first group I just spoke upon, okay, maybe with, you know, I was going to say, maybe as creators, that's the area we can go, okay, if we give you good content and we can put like George Orwell said, you know, and every joke is the heart, you know, seed of a revolution. And that's again, that falls to us as content creators. So okay, how can we put these little seeds in? How can we, you know, try to open people's minds up? Okay, and maybe some of that group you think, okay, maybe that's the applicable. There's amount of people in that group that you could, you know, would be open to logic and open to understanding things. And I think there's a lot of that group, as you probably say, that's where we are right now. That's why people, you know, as much as it is, you know, there's people on YouTube, but you know, most people understand the world is round and they've got a good understanding of science, and they understand about that's kind of, you know, where we were, especially where we were to 100 years ago. That's one group. But I think the other group, Miriam, this is more the other group that I think I tend to spend more time contemplating. And again, it's a spectrum of how much they want to be in it, from the fundamental right to the very, you know, casual. But there's a whole lot of people who are in belief systems, you know, religion, whatever it may be. And those people, even confronted with logic, they don't care. In fact, some people are going, yeah, bring it all on. I don't care if the world ends. Brilliant. That means I'm going to go to heaven and you lot are going to go to hell. And, you know, so we're going to go to paradise and you lot are going to go to some. And there's a lot of people that, and those people, as you probably find, they're the most, in some ways, the most stubborn people in the world, because they just do not want to refuse to listen. And they get into this team mindset. And it's like, and that's why you've got, well, that's what I'm saying. That's why we've got this, you know, clashes of civilizations going on, because one side believes they're going to paradise and the other lot are doing this, and our team is this, and it's ridiculous, because these people, I find, it's almost like it doesn't. That's what I'm saying. That's why there's people in the planet right now who will actually think there is a God up in the heaven who's going to sit down with his big beard and judge us in the. And they actually believe that shit. Literally, they actually think there's a guy in upstairs with a big long white beard. Now, okay, what can you say to these people? It's the same. It's the old Bill Hicks joke when you're saying, well, the world was created 6,000 years ago. Well, explain dinosaurs. Well, God put them there to test us. And there's people that are actually they're stuck in that mindset.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to shift those people, because if you come to them with anything but logic, and I know because I'm speaking for someone who grew up in that environment, so I understand the mindset of someone who's in that religious belief system. You just listen to those people and go, oh well, they don't understand. They're all just, and in fact, I'm not going to listen to those words. And if you're, say, from a Christian angle, you go, oh well, they're just speaking the devil's words. So I'm not going to listen. Put your fingers in your ears and just go, no, 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 no. And those people, what do you do about those people? Because that's what I'm trying to say. That's a huge group of people on this planet. I mean, I can say whether they're very fundamentalist or they're not, but there's a whole set of, can argue maybe a third of the world easily is in that set, and whatever side of the religion they want to fall on, they don't want to listen. And it plays into what you said earlier on, Miriam, because they might sit and say, well, I'm not doing any harm. I live a good life and stuff. Okay, great, but you're still allowing a norm or a virus. It's what you said upon earlier. You're turning away. It's turning away for things and saying, oh well, because it's been done like that for 1,000 years, or because it was written like that by a scribe, 2,000 years ago. That's how it's got to be. And that, to me, the turning away, it's like the old, the old analogy. Evil isn't only done by evil people. It's done by the good people turning away and not saying anything. And that's what you said before about choice.
I was just going to say that I don't. Despite whatever my beliefs are, I don't want to knock the people who have whether they're fundamentalist or whatever. I don't want to knock them and say they are not entitled to their opinion or their belief system, because they are. Again, we have choice. But when that choice leads to evil in the world because the good people of the world stand there and do nothing, say nothing, do nothing, then it becomes a problem. That they turn away, they turn a blind eye to what's going on, or they actively oppose, something that would benefit another group who doesn't believe the way that they believe. Then we've got a problem with the choice. And again, I never want to cram my ideas down someone else's throat, because when people do that to me, I resent it terribly. I was given a choice. I've made my choices. I don't want to impinge on anybody else's choices. But when we're talking about a global situation, and we're talking about on the brink of nuclear destruction, we have to make some compromises. We have to do some listening and talking and discussing and deciding how it is we are going to join together to ensure that we're going to live past this moment, to either keep our ideologies or to change them somewhat, or whatever it is. There has to be some middle ground, because when you've got one fundamentalist group killing another fundamentalist group because they don't believe the same thing, we've got a problem, a huge problem. And so much of the world right now is enmeshed in those kind of conflicts. There is no communication going on. There's a lot of yelling and shouting and screaming and whatever, and killing, but there's no communication. Communication has to go both ways. Somebody has to listen and respond. If you say something, they have to listen and respond. When they say something, you have to listen and respond. There's got to be a two-way street here, otherwise it doesn't work. And we are at such a critical point in our history. We can't afford not to listen. We can't afford not to communicate. And whatever form you choose to communicate in, whether it be writing or public speaking or music or art or diplomacy or whatever you choose, you know, you need to start a dialogue that communicates between two parties and sets the stage for further communication. And we don't have that right now. Nobody's listening. Nobody's listening to what anybody else has to say. And that's why we've got a situation in the world where we're at the brink of destroying ourselves and the planet along with us. I read an article recently that said we are in the midst of the sixth mass. It's have been like at the end of the Permian and the end of the Cretaceous. That there have been mass extinctions. You know, I think it was the Permian where 95% of all life forms on Earth were wiped out. I mean, the planet survived. You know, we're still here, whatever. But because of our inability to communicate, we are creating the environment for another extinction, and we will be a large part of what goes extinct because we can't control ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We can't bring ourselves to compromise or to listen or to try to do something together that makes life on this planet better for everyone, not just for one little select group.
Yeah, you're right, Miriam.
So,
no, I was just going to say. I mean, what you just said there, Miriam. I think that the whole, you know, it's like when you really boil it down to we as a species, we're, you know, even I try to look at everything from every perspective, and even the most fundamentalist person, whoever they may be, they generally want the best for their kids. They generally want they you know, they still got that biological urge to carry on,
mm-hmm.
you know, carry on the genes, carry on love, which, you know, so I think from all these people, all, you know, they've all got that kind of, you know, inherent thing, you know. And the trouble I think we live in the current paradigm at the moment is it's not only the ability, like you said quite rightly, to be able to listen, but we need to put all ideas onto a seat of reason and let people. I would love the most radical Muslim guy and the most radical, I don't know, nationalist to sit in and have a debate where, like you just said, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not hard. We've worked this on out. We've worked this one out with culture. You give one person 5 minutes, the other person 5 minutes, and to and from, and let them have every single one of their ideas. Not well, we're going to let you on the stage, but we're going to have this rule and you can't. No, let every idea up, because
yes.
with this you can wrestle them down and we're going to come to some universal truths. And this is what I mean. The thing about it is, I think even if people would be, I think most people would be quite up for listening to that. The trouble is, it's getting those two people to even be at that position, because they're like, no, I'm not going to listen to someone else who's going to say this about my religion, and I'm not going to listen to someone who wants to burn the flag. And before you know it, like you said, it's the listening. And I think if we're gonna, we need. I don't know. Maybe I think it's something we can all do as individuals. We start calling out these people and say, okay, I'm not gonna close my ears. Okay, look, tell me all your thoughts. I've always been like this. I'll listen to anybody. I'm fascinated to anybody's ideas, why they're doing it, because I think this has been the ultimate point of it. You know, you learn that we've only got this time on this rock. We are very small, and I've never had the cursor, maybe the ego, to think I know. I've always been like, okay, I don't know anything. And tell me, the next person, how do you approach this situation? You're on this, you know, and I'm fascinated by that. And I think generally, I mean, I don't want to get sort of doomy on this. I think generally, you know, as much as there is a lot of doom in that, but equally we have, you know, we have advanced so much, even culture thinking wise, from 60, 70 years ago. You know, I mean, you couldn't go around and slap a woman and, you know, do all the, go look at old films, you know. I mean, you're only talking 30, 40 years ago, and there was blokes slapping women around like, you know, and we've moved on. So as much as we're doomy, I think I think what we live in now, but it goes back to maybe a whole lap, and it's a great way to sort of round this sort of conversation up. As you said, we got these tools that have given us immense power and ability to scream and shout and everything like that. And maybe we just need to, like it all is, we just need to learn to just to calm down, and I think that will happen, because I think, I think what's happened is, like you said, Miriam, which is where we're at this really weird crux of, we're in a strange generation in that sense. We were living pre-internet, and we understand all those things.
Yeah.
But I look at now and think, well, that the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old that's just growing up with nothing out of this, I don't think they'll be like we are, because we're just like kids. We're like, wow, we've got all our dreams coming true, and look what we can do. But I don't. I think, like, I'm saying, I saw some of this Pokemon Go stuff, and I thought, okay, this is a different thing. This is about getting humans to meet other human beings, and these kids aren't as, I don't know. That's my great future. My great inspiration is that as much as we can get doomy, I think the kids who are born inherently with this, they have a very different perspective. And I'm not saying it's a generation thing, because I think every individual can. But that's what gives me great faith, is that, they're born into a world where these tools are already there, whereas we were born into a world where we're just like kids in a playground with it. So, that's how I generally think. That's why I think it, like you said before, I think like all of this is, whether you look at the the negative or the doomy side or the positive side, it's like you said before, it's still a neutral, and it's what we all do with it. And it wraps right back to what you said at the beginning. It's all about that communication, and about listening, and again, for the people who do communicate, which is maybe a wrap up of this whole conversation, it's both sides. Learning to listen really good is one thing that people have forgotten about, and equally the people who are creative, the writers, that all the rest of it, is putting things out to people that, like we said before, don't try to be very aware that what you're doing has a great power, and it does, because these thoughts remain, and people live and die on words that are put down on bits of paper.
Yeah, I certainly, as a writer, I certainly see my writing as a venue for ideas, for possibilities, for solutions. I mean, I deal mostly in my personal writing in science fiction. So I can create whatever universe I want. I can create whatever situation I want at any time that I want. And that gives me a great amount of freedom to say what I want. And it's out there. People can either accept it or not accept it. I mean, they're free to do either. I just ask that they give it a chance. See what I have to say. Do you agree or not? If you don't, why? Tell me why. Start the dialogue. Well, actually, I started the dialogue, but listen to what I have to say, then respond back. Give me feedback. Tell me why you didn't like it. Tell me why you thought it was a bad idea that, this person did something. Because it's the writing is putting the idea out there, and the same thing with a painter or a musician or whatever. You put it out there, and then the dialogue starts. And that's really, it will be, I believe, the creative types who will get the dialogue going. And I just hope that people will pick up the ball and run with it and respond to what is being said and done, because that's really our only hope.
Yep. Well, as always, Miriam, we kind of scratched upon the surface. I'm left with a conversation where I'm asking more questions than answers, which is always the best way to do. And I think just to sort of briefly, before we do wrap this up, I think it's fascinating. This one again, there's so many areas we've yet to sort of for future conversations. But I think it ties back to what you just said. Then one of the great things is almost, you could sum this up like, sit down, make yourself a cup of tea, and just spend that 10 minutes talking to somebody. And in the art of, and this is again something I know we've got a great love for. Again, we've done 3 podcasts, we haven't even touched upon that whole area. So, but I think these are the forms. I think anything that gets a human being in front of another human being, I think is a great thing. And because even just naturally, if you're sitting down and, like, let's say, having a cup of tea or whatever it may be, they almost come naturally, because in the process of distraction, the drinking, the stuff, you're listening and you're slowing yourself down. And I think that's a lot about slowing yourself down. Well, look, Miriam, I know it's been fascinating conversation as always. We'll have to get you back on again soon, because as we said pre podcast, I mean, I think There's some really sort of in-depth areas we want to talk about, and I think maybe next time we come on, we sort of say we can have a conversation about migraines and stuff, because that's as you said, that's something that I think is a white elephant that's not spoken about, and it goes back to what we're saying tonight. We need to talk about things, and because with that talking, you can get some insights, and with insights, gain understanding, and that pushes us forward, I think.
I agree.
So anyway, like I said, it's been fascinating talking to you tonight, and well, thank you for your time, Miriam, and from me over here in Scotland to you over there in America, man. God bless, and life is people.